All right, good morning, everyone. We're beginning this week learning Parshas Matos Maseh, a double Parsha, double Torah portion we're reading this week. We're reading a double Torah portion, Matot Maseh. So we're going to try in Likuti Torah to take one mimer from each of these two Torah portions. Matot talks about, it begins with the laws of vows. Very interesting laws, vows, and how a vow can be annulled. Sometimes a husband can annul his wife's vows, etc. How important it is to keep a vow. And then immediately after that, in Parshat Matot, is the story of the war that the Jewish people made against Midian. The war that the Jewish people make against Midian. And if you remember last week in last week's Torah portion, Boker Tov, Shalom, Shavuot Tov. Last week's Torah portion, Moses started off by saying, it says, Tzroret Midyanim, make a war against the Midyanim, and it didn't get to it until this week. Now they're making this war against the Midyanim. And interestingly, God tells Moses that, remember I told you you're not going to go into the land of Israel, where it's true, you're not going to go to the land of Israel. So you just have one more thing to do. Make this war, and then you're going to die. And it said Moses immediately did it. So God said, I'm going to tell you how to make this war. Gather take 1,000 men from each tribe. Hechaltzu means armed. Go armed. Hechaltzu mitchem. Go in armed from each tribe. Don't know why this is happening, huh? I see. Okay, I'm still back in here. All right. There we go. Okay. Here, excuse me 1 second. I just had a little problem here. There it is. Good, wonderful. Thank you. Good. Okay. So it says take 1,000 people from each tribe. Let's go. It says, Hechaltzu meitchem, arm. Take chalutzim means they should be armed. Meitchem, from you. 12,000 men, 1,000 men for each tribe. Tzorech lahavin, says the Rebbe, we have to understand something over here. It should have said Yechaltzu. It's that Hechaltzu means like everybody. Should be a general draft. And that's not what it is. It should say Yechaltzu. Moses, you should take, right? You should pick. Not that everyone should arm themselves. Moses, you have to arm. You have to pick people and arm them. Ki Hechaltzu mashma kulchem. When it says that they should be armed, right, getting prepared for war, this implies everybody. But afterwards it says Hechaltzu meitchem, from you. Hainu miksatam, only a few, 1,000 people from each tribe. There was no tribe that had 1,000 people, and you just had to take 1,000 from each and every tribe. If so, Yechaltzu. It should say, Moses, you take from them. Hechaltzu, right? Should be armed. V'gam also, Mahu inyan nekamas Hashem b'Midyan. What does it mean? Why does God say you have to take I want to take a vengeance against Midian? It's my revenge. Why is it God's revenge? I mean, the Midianites they made trouble for the Jews. The Jews, that's their revenge. Why is it God's revenge? So once again, how many people actually go? It says that there's only 12,000 people that went. And here the word hechalzu seems to imply that everyone has to go to this war, and that it's a war, it's God's war. It's not the war of the Jewish people. We're going to see what this means to us. This is going to be very, very important to us, day-to-day life. We're going to see. Also, matos. What does it say? You should make mikol. You should take 1,000 from each tribe. Mikol matot, for each and every. It should have said mikol. Sorry, lichol matot. What does it mean? You should take 4 or 2, all the tribes. It should say from all the tribes. Take soldiers to the tribes. What does it say? Likol, look at what it says. Elif limate. So, excuse me. Likol matot. If you continue in the sentence, you'll see it says, you should take to all of the tribes, 1,000 people from each tribe. What do you mean take to them? Take from them. Not it should say mikol, from all the tribes. Okay, so the Rebbe is going to say that this enemy called Midian is something that's very, very present now, and it's one of the biggest enemies of the Jewish people, and it's inside of us. So let's see. Achine bechinas Midian, this aspect of just called Midian, who neged bechinat shem avai. This goes against God. Therefore, kodem Matan Torah, before Matan Torah, there had to be hachnat klipat Midian. There had to be the subjugation of Midian. Al yadei Yitro, by means of Yitro. Kohen Midian. Yitro was the priest of Midian. She'omar, that Midian, that he said, Ata yadati, now I know. Okay, so interesting, Yitro also came from Midian. Who is Yitro? Yitro is the father-in-law of Moses. Yitro, Moses married Yitro's daughter, right? He married Yitro's daughter. And Yitro comes from Midian. In fact, it says that Yitro was the Kohen Midian. He was the high priest of Midian. He knew all the idolatry in the world. So it was very important that Yitro should come from this place called Midian, because in a way, Midian is going to be the biggest enemy of the Jewish people. The Jewish people have a lot of enemies, right? And each one of the Palestine, it says, is each one represents a certain aspect of life, which makes it very difficult to serve God, if not impossible. Now, really, the fact is that everything in the world is being created by God for a purpose, with a meaning, everything. Some has a positive purpose, some have a negative purpose, right? Some things you just have to learn to keep away from, some that you have to learn to avoid, negative things which are inside of us, and other things are positive. But essentially, everything in the world has a positive lesson to learn from, even if the positive lesson is to avoid it. And sometimes avoiding something is much more difficult than doing something. Right? Sometimes, especially if that thing, if you really want to do it. Take an example, fear. Right? Fear is like everywhere. You know, fear is just a natural part of people's life. They're afraid of what people think. They're afraid of tomorrow. They're afraid of getting old. They're afraid of getting sick. They're afraid of getting a failure. People are afraid. Right? Be afraid. That fear is a big enemy of Judaism. On the other hand, there's good types of fear, that you're afraid to go against God. You're afraid to hurt other people for no reason. You're afraid to steal, to lie, all the negative commandments. You're afraid to eat milk and meat together. You're afraid, not that you're afraid of necessarily getting punished, but you're just afraid to do the wrong thing. You don't want to do the wrong thing. So Midian is one of these things that you really have to, it's not enough to just avoid it. You can't avoid it in a way. You have to fight against it. It's something that's inside of us. We're going to see what it is. And it's everywhere and it's all time. So back then, Moses just said, take 1,000 from every tribe. But the war is still going on now. And it's going on within us. Let's see. Inyan is like Mamre Zal, the B'Shas Matan Torah, when God gave the Torah, Nekabtzu Kol Umos, they gathered all the non-Jews together. Adshit Patchu Kulam, all of them said, Hashem Oz Lamo Yitain, Hashem Yavurechet Amo B'Shalom. God has given power to his people. God has blessed his people with peace. Okay, what's going on? It says that when God gave the Torah to the Jewish people, right? The Jewish people got out of Egypt, and pretty much everybody knew about it in the world. When God gave the Torah to the Jews, everyone in the world knew about it. The world was shaking. Everyone sensed that something was going on. And they went to Bilam. It says that Bilam was the master sorcerer. He knew what was going on in the upper worlds. And people realized that something spiritual was going on. They couldn't figure out what it was, and it was having an effect on the world. And he said, and the God is giving the creator of the universe, is giving the Torah to the Jewish people. And everyone said, Hashem Oz Lamo Yitain. God is giving the Jewish people, his people, God is giving power. Oz is giving power to his people. God is blessing his people, the Jews, with peace. Result that the rabbis say, a person that learns the Torah, masim shalom, he makes peace, bepamilia shalmaila, in the upper, all the angels, all the, what do you call it, the upper entourage, all the angels and all the stars and all the powers. You learn Torah, you make peace in the upper worlds of bepamilia shalmata, and also in the physical world. Learning Torah. That's what learning Torah does. Okay, it sort of makes sense a little bit. I mean, God creates the whole world. He's creating everything all the time. And everything, if people wouldn't mess everything up, the world would be pretty harmonious. God is creating it. We see people live, the heart works, the lungs work, the each and every bug and each and everything. That it's alive due to harmony. The body works, right? The respiratory system, the endocrine system, everything works. They're all working together. The eyes work together with the nose, with the ears, with this, with the hands. There's harmony, there's unity. Shalom, that's called peace. Peace, everything is doing its job. How does everything know its job? Well, that's why God gave the Torah, right? The guy gave the Torah. The Torah is the instruction book from the Creator to the creation, right? God is telling us how he created, what he's creating the world for, how to make the world work. So that's when Jews learn, but Jews have to learn the Torah. It's not just that there's the book here, is in the library, is in the synagogue. So when Jews learn the Torah, it means the oral Torah, learning the Torah, understanding what God wants, not making mistakes in learning, or yes, making mistakes and then correcting the mistakes, is by means of this, is it makes peace in the world. Ulahavin, to understand. So this is a wonderful thing. Peace. Ulahavin, base shalomos. What does it mean? These two types of peace. Peace in the upper worlds, peace in the lower worlds. Shalom b'pamilia shalmaila, shalom b'pamilia shamata. When we learn the Torah, we make peace in the upper creations and in the lower creations. What's going on here? That's the Torah. Lahavin, to understand these two pieces, these two types of peace, harmony. We have to understand, first of all, how important this idea of peace is. When the first temple was destroyed, the rabbis say, that God was willing to overlook the terrible crimes that were going on over there, namely idolatry and sexual crimes and bloodshed. That's what was going on in Israel. First temple. God said, I'll overlook it. All these three things I can sort of excuse. V'lo viter al bittul Torah. God was not able, though, to overlook the crime of not learning Torah. And therefore, the temple was destroyed. I mean, it added on to the other three things that were done. But God said, okay, if it was just this alone, murder, people get mad, things happen, people go crazy. Lust, I understand, people fall into lust. It's a terrible sin, but what can we do? Idolatry. Okay, people have a tremendous lust to worship idols, to worship people, to worship this. They worship the golden calf. Okay, let's say I can overlook that. But as soon as the Jews didn't learn the Torah, then that gathered up all the other three sins, all of the four together was not enough. It was, well, God said I couldn't overlook this. Torah. Chorban by Yesheni. What do we say Torah does? It makes peace. The Chorban by Yesheni in the second temple, Hayarak Bishvil Avon Sinatrina. It says in the second temple that the Jewish people didn't do such big sins. Idolatry wasn't so popular then. It says that the rabbis fasted and prayed that the Jews didn't have such a big craze for idolatry. There was still idolatry, but not like it in the first temple. And the same thing with murder and licentiousness. People more or less, the big sin in the second temple was sinatrina. Sinatrina, what's sinatrina? Hating someone for no reason. Hating someone for no reason. That was the big sin. That was everywhere, and it was the worst. Now, of course, a person can ask, what does that mean? Hating person for nobody hates someone for no reason. I mean, that's like, maniacs are born because who knows, their mother didn't treat them right, or they had something and they go around killing people. They hate the world. Again, okay, that's very rare. It's very rare that a person hates for no reason at all. That's a real, a really sick person. Here it's the sin was ubiquitous. What is it? Was everywhere. Everybody hated others for no reason. How can that be? What does it mean for no reason? Everybody has a reason to hate somebody. You have a reason you hate somebody. So the answer is no. What came first? The hatred or the reason? Some people hate others just because they're others. And afterwards they look for reasons. Anyone that doesn't exactly agree with me, if so, lama achshav. So the first temple was destroyed because of idolatry, sexual crimes, murder, and not learning Torah. That was the first temple. The second temple was destroyed because of hatred. Hatred. People hated each other. If so, lama achshav arichas agolos shebeit hamikdash charav yoter miyud zayin meot shana. How can it be that the first temple with such terrible sins, the exile was 70 years, and now it's almost 2,000 years. At the time the Alter Rebbe wrote this, it was 17,000 years. Well, I'm sorry, 1,700 years, 1,700 years. Now it's almost 2,000. The Alter Rebbe wrote this 300 years ago. But Galat Bavel, when the Jews went into exile after the first temple, which was because of these terrible sins, Afal Pikein, nevertheless, it was only 70 years. See, hating another person is so bad. It's so bad. And not only that, so they'll stop. Okay, so they can stop. Right? Let us come back to no, it must be that we're doing it now. If that's a reason to destroy a whole temple. And this is what's going to be the clip of Midian. This is what the Midian, then Moses said you have to make a war against. Midian is going to be this thing of hating people for no reason. In the 7 nations, that were in the land of Israel, when the Jews came to the land of Israel, it says, it says, the commandment was to destroy them totally. And therefore, when the Jewish people sinned in the first temple, these and these 7 bad emotions, anger, it explains in the first chapter of Tanya, lust and things like that. In the first temple, right? That's what brought them to kill each other. Anger, what brought them to do the idolatry, whatever, the false love, false this. Why did they do these sins in the first temple? Because it must be that they left over from these 7 nations that they were supposed to destroy. They left some of them over. Like it says, Atam lo tichratu brit. Don't make a covenant with the nations that are there. V'lo shamatem b'koli, and you didn't listen to what I said. The Jewish people were supposed to have destroyed all the 7 nations, and because they didn't, so eventually the tendencies of the character tendencies of these nations got imbued in the Jewish people. And the Jews didn't listen. Because of this, nichshel ba'averos, because they did these terrible sins that we said before of idolatry and murder, etc. It was because of these 7 nations, so that they didn't destroy them. Therefore, it left over in the Jews these 7 bad character traits. Anger, pleasure, laziness, etc. Okay, and therefore, when they went into exile, it was only 70 years. Why? Because by means of this, they fixed up the 7 bad, negative emotions. The kol mida, each one was 10 years. Each one of the 7 was fixed up in a 10-year period. But in the second temple, lo yachet b'midos ros. In the second temple, the problem wasn't so much bad character traits, personality traits. The crime was hatred. This is the aspect of Midian, that Midian is not one of these 7 nations. It's not totally bad. Like Taivos Rose, like people that run after desires or whatever, and they have to steal other people's money or take other people's things, or anger or murder. Niuf. Ki'im, but niuf is a licentiousness. Ki'im, sinatrinam, shu, lushan, Midian. The whole idea of sinatrina, hating someone for no reason, that this is the language of Midian, Midan, like Madonam Riva. Like it says, what is it? Contentiousness, that's the word for it. Being belligerent in everything you do. Even though it's not totally bad, because you always find something that could be bad in the other person, or at least you make an excuse. Nevertheless, this is the source of bad. It's opposite of godliness. Okay, what is exactly is godliness? What does it mean? Why is the opposite of godliness? Godliness is, what does it mean, godliness? Godliness is supposed to be that you are aware that you are a creation. You are not God. I have to be aware that I am a creation of God. God created me in his image. It says I have emotions, I have a personality, I have an ego, I have feelings, right? I love being right, calling the shots, doing whatever I want to. Right? But after all that, even though I have all these qualities, godly qualities, I have free will, I have intellect, and I have this, but the fact of the matter is I'm not God. And because I'm not God, so therefore I have to not totally rely on myself. I have to check myself out. Could be that I'm wrong. Could be that I'm wrong. What is sinatrina? What does it mean, hatred of somebody else? We'll talk about this, but essentially what it is you hate the other person just because he's not you. You hate another person just because he's different than you. He doesn't agree with you. Right? You can call it the suspicion, worry, jealousy, fear, whatever, but it brings about the fact that you don't like other people, or you don't like particular other people. Essentially, what it is you don't like people who are different than you. That's called sinatrina. I guess in America now they call it bigotry. You can see how it's twisted all around and it can be really seriously misused. But nevertheless, this idea of hating someone just because he's not like you or he doesn't agree with you, this means you hate the person because of his very existence. Right? His very existence. He can't be different than anyone who doesn't agree with you. You hate them down deep. You don't appreciate differences. What's the way out of it? The way out of it is to realize, listen, God creates everybody. God knows what he's doing, right? God knows what he's doing. And not only that, nobody's really threatening me in the end. I mean, and if they are, there's no reason to hate them. Unless you have really ample reason. There's some people, there really is ample reason, and you're not fooling yourself, and there's a person who's really dangerous, etc. Right? If people would have hated Yerovam ben Nevat, the world would be a better place. Says the godliness is unity. Shudavka bechinas achdus viskalus. Shehu yesod shall call Torah. This is the source, this is the foundation of all of the Torah. Like Hillel HaZaken said, somebody asked him, what is the whole entire Torah? Teach me the whole Torah on one foot. And he said, he said, what you don't like, don't do to your friend. And the rest of the Torah, this is just an explanation on this idea. Don't do to others what you hate. Okay, that's pretty general, but we'll talk about that in a second. Vahu Pirushahu, Vahainu Mishum, because de kachu lamaila, so it is above. Hashem Echad, God is one. God is unity, these kalus. And what does God do? Look how God makes the world. Everything is different from everything else. If even for no other reason that everything is in a different place. Even if every snowflake was identical, but still every snowflake has a different place. And the fact is they're not. Every atom is different. I don't know. But even if all the atoms are exactly the same, but nevertheless, just the fact that they're in different places, that itself makes everything is different. And nevertheless, everything is unity. It all works. There's a beauty in this difference. It says that God and his creations and his bodies are one. Huwa Yudea, Huwa Dea. God is the knower. He's the knowledge. What does it mean? That God creates everything from his awareness. And so everything is just really part of God's awareness. Let's not get too anthropomorphic about it, because the fact is God is totally outside of this whole business. He's the creator. It's not that the world is him. But nevertheless, the world has no real existence to it. It's being God. So everything we see is an amazing, amazing miracle. And everything is different and everything is harmonious. And that's the essence of what God is harmony. Perush, what does it mean? Ki perush echad, when it says that God is one. We say that's the motto of Judaism. God is one. Ein perush, it doesn't mean mehut atzmo yitzbarech. It doesn't mean that God, in his essence, he's one. And there's nothing like God. But there's also a world and there's other things. The hu nikra yechid, that's not called one. That's called yechid. That's called God is unique. Ach perush echad, when it says that God is one, what does it mean one? Hainu echad b'zayin rekim v'oretz l'mayla hu b'chinat zayin midot. It says God is one in the seven heavens. What is the seven heavens? The seven heavens corresponds to what's called God's seven emotions, shekulam b'telim, that all of them are unified in God's oneness. In other words, one would be the difference. The difference between one and unique is, let's say you bring out the composer, right? You bring out the Tchaikovsky or whatever it is, and this is the unique. He's the best composer ever existed. Here he is. Everybody claps their hands, right? It's very nice, and he can also play the violin. And he plays the violin, and it's very beautiful. That's called unique, yachid. Right? You can say the same thing about God. God is totally unique. He creates everything. There's nothing like God. God is this, right? But there's a world. The world is separate, but nothing like God. God is totally alone in as far as godliness goes. But then there's what's called echad. Echad means you bring out the whole entire orchestra and they all play. Every single player, every single the musician is different. And they have different instruments and they sit in different places and they play different things. And that makes harmony. That's the creation. That's true godliness. That's true godliness. The world is this amazing orchestra with infinite numbers of atoms and molecules and creations and beings, and it all works in harmony. If so, this idea of midyan, the nargan nifrad, and the idea of separateness, who hamanaged l'shem Hashem, it opposes godliness. It wants to make dissension. Shehu echad, that God is one. God is one even in the lower worlds. And the whole idea of this aspect of midyan is to hate anything that's different than you. Anti-harmony. Shagam kol midos avchim kulam misachtim ubetelim ba'or avaya. That even all of the different aspects and emotions and facets of godliness that are in the world that reflect itself in all of the billions and billions of types and creations, that there's harmony between them. The opposite of this is midyan. And we can throw in that this is only by human beings. Only human beings can make such a thing. Alkain, therefore, galut zeh, this galut, which is tikkun ubir b'chinas sinatrina, this exile, which is fixing up the third, the preparation for the third temple. The second temple was destroyed. It's already been almost 2,000 years. Why? Because of the sin of hatred, not being able to bear anything different than you. Mishta'ez man rav. That's why it takes so long, because it's so deeply implanted in us. Essentially, what it means is feeling yourself and not feeling God. If you would feel God, or at least believe there was such a thing as God, as you'd understand that everything is being created by God. This person is making me mad, right? He cut me off in his car. This person is being created by God, and I'm being created by God. And God doesn't want me to get angry in such situations. It doesn't say you're supposed to get angry, right? There's very, very rare situations where you're supposed to get angry. Very, very rare. And people like me and you, I don't know, never really gets angry, right? You can be forceful sometimes, but to get angry, Moses could get angry. And it says even he got punished. If so, not being able to bear anything other than you is the opposite of godliness. That's what the rabbis say. Rishonim shitgalo avonam nitgala kitzam. The first ones, the people, the sinners in the first temple, that you could see clearly what their sins were. So because they clearly saw what their sins were, as therefore they could fix it, and there was only 70 years. But us, that we don't reveal what our sin is, we don't know what our sin is, we can't reveal it, therefore it's been up to now. What do you mean? A person that's what do you mean we don't hear? The Rebbe just told us what the sin is. What do you mean we don't know what it is? He forgot, he just said 2 lines ago what it is. But the answer is not very simple. A person, God forbid, that he is involved somehow with murder, licentiousness, idolatry, so he knows what he did. It's a clear thing. He didn't say, oh, I forgot I killed somebody yesterday. I just did it by accident. I didn't. That person doesn't do that. God forbid someone takes someone's life, right? So he knows what he did. He knows clearly that he took somebody's life. He knows that he went and he worshipped this idol. It's not that he by accident bowed down to a paper bag and they said, there's an idol inside of it. A person knows what he's doing when he worships an idol. And he knows what he's doing when he's doing licentiousness. He knows what he's doing. He knows it's right. So if so, that's clear. A person knows he's not learning Torah. But the hatred, somebody for no reason, what are you talking about for no reason? You know who this person is. Everybody has a million reasons to hate other people. Now, if you're really right, and if it's really true, then it could be a reason to hate somebody, if it's really true. But if you look into it, you'll find out that even if it is true, it certainly doesn't warrant the level of hatred, and also not to negate the person totally. So he has bad things about him, but maybe there's something good. No, you negate the person totally. Now here we're speaking essentially Jews and Jews. Jews have a big tendency to hate other Jews. Nitgala avonotam says, because the first generations after the first temple, they knew clearly what their sins were. So they knew it was totally bad. Therefore, they could do tshuva on this. Masha Enkim, which is not the case. The last generation, Shalom nitgala avonam, hainu inyan sinatrina, this whole idea of hating other people for no reason. Shekol echad mata'et atzmo. She'en ze'avon, it's not such a big sin. He says all sorts of sins. Why? I don't like him because he's a different group than me, and I know, you know who this group is, you know what they do, right? And this person, I don't like him because he's poor, because his color of his skin, his color of his eyes, the length of his nose. There's really good reasons to hate this person. Yet, did you see his nose? Is a big nose. People with big noses, everybody knows that people that have like that they're stupid people. What do you mean they're not stupid people? I see you're one of them. There's no end to it because people are afraid. It basically comes from fear, but it develops into that it's not God's world anymore. It's my world. Somebody even told me that he and his family, things were so sick that one brother hated the other brother for some reason or another. And it doesn't make any difference that like 20 years, 50 years later, whatever he found out that the reason that he hated this other brother was because of a mistake. He hated the brother because he said to him good morning one day, and the brother didn't answer him back. He didn't answer him back. And because of that, it happened to be that day the guy had his tooth pulled and he was in terrible pain. And he didn't even, anyway. So listen to what happened. He hated his brother to the degree that he hated anybody that didn't hate his brother. And if his brother made like a bar mitzvah or something like this is really sick. His brother made a bar mitzvah or something like that. So everybody that went to the bar mitzvah, he hated him. And then he got to the point where he was even hating it. The guy had a good mind. He remembered everybody, hated everybody that was family with these people. It says because of that, Lonis Galach Kitzam. It should be that when you meet a new person, it should be like, it's happy. It's a surprise. God is sending a person. And then you find out if it's a person you don't get along with. Okay, so I don't get along with the person. Okay, it's my fault. It's my problem. But to hate another person just because I don't get along with them is because I think I might not get along. It's like they say Stalin killed people. He killed people, not people that were against him, not people that did anything against him, and not people that even thought against him, people that were going to think against him. He just killed anybody. Anyway, that it should be by the Jewish people. What can we do? And it is, and that's why you can't accept another person. Because you don't really regret hating the other person. Oh, for instance, Lavorera Pasolus Hadak Tzorech Shehu Yoter Mina Pasolus Agas. In order to refine very fine dross, Shehu Nikar Lakal Shehu Pasolus. Right? It's very, very difficult. Let's say you have wine, you buy really expensive wine, and it has little tiny flecks or something in it, little flecks. So what is this little flecks? He says, oh, that's nothing. It's just, what do you mean? I paid $100 a bottle. I want to get rid of all these flecks. These look at the little tiny white things. Okay, so he strains it. They're still there. So you have to have a finer strainer and a finer strainer, right? Until finally, look, there's still a couple left. Come on. That's the same thing inside of us. Little tiny, almost not perceptible hatred and of other people, right, is inside of us. And it's so fine that we don't even notice it. The Cain also it is bedinim in the Gemara. Also, if there's laws, for instance, in the Gemara, if it's very obvious, you don't have to look into it so much. Sha'orev isur, to know that, for instance, a crow is forbidden to eat, and a pigeon is permissible. But in order to clarify laws which are not so clear, that you can't see it so clearly, you have to have a long time and understand what it is. But that's the whole Talmud. Sometimes there are going to be pages and pages and pages to know, what's the law if you marry, you give a woman money that's loaned to you, right? And loan to you, or if you loan a woman money to marry her, you have to marry a woman, you have to give her money. What if that money is borrowed money? What if so then it goes back and forth, very fine laws. And after you do, you really go over all the aspects of this law, you can find out that it was really forbidden. Similarly, tikkun ubirur avon sinas chinam. This idea of hating people for no reason, it's not considered to be such a bad thing in the eyes of a person. Because a person imagines that I'm doing what the Torah says. Some people really love it. They love to hate people. They love to hate people. And this is like a sign of their religiousness, that they are really careful about this, not like the other people that did, right? Like food. Some people are very careful about food, what they eat. It has to be sure that you're sure. Well, other people, I'm careful about people. right? People. I don't want to eat everything, any type of food. Good. Then other people are, I don't want to talk to everybody. Right? It's like you feel very, very religious if you really hate. The more you hate a person, the more it's like you feel that you are really religious and you are really doing a good job, because nobody knows the hidden evil inside of this person. Is you have to, in order to purify this, it takes a long time. Okay, but in order to understand what's so difficult about, what's so bad about this thing of hating other people, how is it that it opposes the name of God? Why is this such a bad thing? Good, it's bad. Okay, I can understand it's got, but because of that, we have to be in exile for 2,000 years just because people don't like each other. Is it that severe a blemish on my personality that I can't stand certain people? Right? Is it why? Why is it so bad? Why does it oppose God Himself? This we'll find out, God willing, tomorrow. Okay, let's take just a little